The movie begins on a stormy night with a song on the radio in a house. Suddenly, there's a distortion, and we see Rispati sleeping. It's midnight, and the house is quiet. His bedroom door opens, and his mother appears, telling him to take care of the house. His father calls her to come along, and she leaves. Rispati wakes up, finding his door open. Confused, he goes downstairs looking for his parents, where we see his father passing behind him. But when he turns around, no one is there. Suddenly, a window flies open, startling him. He closes it and heads back to his room, but stops when he hears his mother calling his name. The furniture slides to the side, and a figure appears at the window. And before he can understand anything, his mother flies toward him but vanishes when he looks back. Terrified, he shuts his eyes, and suddenly, his mother grabs him, prompting him to rush toward his room, but the door slams shut on its own. As he struggles to open the door, his mother moves closer, but the door finally opens, and he darts into his room. His mother tries to open the door from outside, and Rispati asks who she is, telling her to leave, to which she pleads for help, insisting that she's his mother. Shocked, Rispati moves toward the door, but just then, his wardrobe door opens, and his father calls his name. Before emerging from the wardrobe, he opens the door and unexpectedly finds himself on a road and runs toward a car, only to find the dead bodies of his parents inside. Suddenly, he is confronted by another version of himself, who asks, "Why didn't you die with them?" And it all turns out to be a nightmare. When he comes downstairs, he notices his grandpa watching the news on TV. The reporter talks about a mother found dead in her room, with strangulation marks around her neck, and she was discovered by her child in the morning. This marks the second case of a body found in similar circumstances, with another resident having met the same fate recently. We next see him on the bus to school when he suddenly feels something strange, and the ghosts of his mom and dad appear, pleading with him for help. He jolts awake in class, terrified and disoriented, realizing it was a nightmare. His friend Turta shows him some photos on his phone, explaining that the people in the photos were all found like this, despite nothing being odd the night before. From what he discovered, they all had dreams of meeting dead people the previous nights. Just then, their teacher enters the room, announcing a new student from Jakarta, and she introduces herself as Wulan. As she walks to her seat, Rispati and Tirta notice her staring at him. Tirta asks, "Why is she staring at him? And has he met her before?" Rispati looks back and sees Wulan still watching him intently. Tirta tells Rispati that she looked into Wulan's background and discovered that she had to leave her old school because she often got possessed. He points out how she has been isolated since she arrived. Next, we see him at the hospital, where the doctor tells him that he'll prescribe something for his insomnia, but adds that he knows it's not the root cause of the problem. The doctor asks if he is ready to talk about it now, to which Rispati says there's no need and asks for the dosage to be increased. When they return home, Grandpa tells Rispati he should have listened to what Dr. Lesmana said, to which Rispati responds, "What is there to talk about? And does he want him to talk about how his parents died?" Just then, Abdul arrives, and Grandpa introduces him to Rispati, explaining that Abdul has come from his village and will be helping with the household chores. Rispati starts to leave, but Grandpa stops him, pulls out a bottle from a drawer, and hands it to him, saying, "If Lesmana's prescription doesn't work, he can try this massage oil." Rispati feels something strange again the next day at school, and suddenly, he sees his parents standing before him. They begin moving toward him, causing him to panic. But just then, Wulan grabs his hand and tells him to stay calm. After a moment, the ghosts of his parents vanish, and Rispati realizes Wulan is standing in line behind. On his way home, a man dozes off, resting his head on Rispati's shoulder. Rispati tries to push him away, but the moment he touches his head, he is suddenly transported to another world, where everyone on the bus is asleep, and in front of him, he sees a hospital room where a couple is crying over their child. Perplexed, he gets off the bus and walks toward the scene, and to his shock, he realizes that the man standing there is the same one who had fallen asleep on his shoulder. That night, Rispati applies the massage oil his grandpa gave him and lies down in bed, trying to sleep. After some time, as the clock strikes 12, a few leaves fall on him, waking him up, and to his surprise, he finds that he is no longer in his room, but in an unfamiliar place. Confused, he gets out of bed, trying to understand what's happening, and notices a tree in front of him with a man entangled in its roots. The man wakes up with a scream, startling Respati, who falls to the ground, and suddenly an old woman grabs his hand, asking who he is and telling him he shouldn't be there. As she speaks, another woman appears, singing a lullaby. The man trapped in the roots frees himself and starts moving toward the singing woman, calling her Dinah, and Respati realizes with shock that this is the same man he saw in his vision earlier. The old woman urges Respati to leave, then suddenly stabs herself in the neck. Horrified, Respati watches as the man continues toward the woman, only for a demonic hand to pull him inside the tree. Terrified, Respati runs, but he falls onto a broken tree and jolts awake, realizing it was all a nightmare. When he comes downstairs, he finds his grandpa watching the news, and the report is about a woman who discovered her husband dead in a shocking state at their home the previous night. The reporter mentions that this is the third case with the same MO and the police are still investigating. As the victim's photo appears on the screen, Respati is stunned, as it's the same man he saw in his nightmare. At school, Respati tells Turta that he met a man on the bus yesterday and accidentally saw into his mind. The man's daughter had died, and last night he dreamed of that man being strangled, and now the man has been found dead. Turta asks what he's supposed to do about it, to which Respati insists it can't be a coincidence, and asks for his help to figure it out. They skip school and go to the man's house, where Respati sees the woman he envisioned, crying over her husband's death and claiming that her husband was killed by a demon. Turta asks a nearby man why she would say that, and he explains that her husband was found in their bedroom in a position resembling someone experiencing sleep paralysis, with strangulation marks around his neck. At that moment, Respati spots the old woman from his nightmare, and filled with anger, he starts moving toward her to get the answers. However, the woman quickly retreats into an alley, and when Respati reaches the alley, he discovers that she has vanished. Later, Turta asks Respati what he was chasing, to which he explains that there was someone else in his dream besides Bayou, and he saw the old lady. Turta dismisses it as mere coincidence, but Woolen interjects, saying that the dream realm can be a dangerous place if you're not careful. She shows them an article about the dream realm, explaining that it's a dimension where souls rest whenever they sleep. Turta says he thought she understood the supernatural, but she's just a wannabe who searches Google for her theories. Respati insists that he saw it in his dream, and Woolen responds that only a few truly understand the dream realm, and what she does know is that not everyone can retain their consciousness there as he can. Respati asks how he's able to enter the dream realm and retain full awareness, to which Woolen explains that some people are born with special abilities. Some see them as gifts, others as curses. She then suggests what he saw wasn't just a dream, meaning he didn't just dream of murder, but he actually witnessed Bayou's murder in the dream realm. When Respati returns home, his grandpa tells him that his teacher called, saying he skipped school and only showed up after recess. He expresses concern, saying he doesn't want to see him like this, to which Respati insists he's fine. But Grandpa disagrees, pointing out that he's changed since the incident and that things have only gotten worse. He then asks, what if something bad happens to him? To which Respati says, maybe that's just the way it is. Later, Abdul tells Respati that he's finished his chores for the day and was about to inform his grandpa, but maybe he's already asleep. Before leaving, Abdul hesitates and says, sorry if he is overstepping, but does he argue with his grandfather often? He adds that he gets it, that living with family isn't always easy, and he went through something similar, to which Respati asks, does he live with an annoying old man as well? Abdul, feeling more comfortable with Respati, tells him that it can be annoying sometimes, but he thinks they should still cherish the time they have with their family, because they never really know how much time they have left with them. Before leaving, he tells Respati that the oil his grandfather gave him is really good, as it is the extract of a flower called Malam, Lady of the Night, and people say that the flower can cure many kinds of diseases. Respati applies the oil before bed, but once again, he's transported into the dream realm. Terrified, he gets up and starts looking around, and this time, he sees a man singing a lullaby and notices an old woman entangled in the roots of a tree. As the woman begins to move toward her husband, Respati tries to stop her, but she attacks him, shoving him to the ground before heading toward a glowing portal. Horrified, Respati watches as she steps into the light, and moments later, he hears her blood-curdling screams. Her severed head is then thrown out of the portal, sending Respati into a panic, and as he attempts to flee, someone pulls him aside, revealing that it's the old woman who warns him to be quiet. She spots a demonic figure passing by in the distance, and whispers to Respati that only he can defeat her, and Malam is the key. Suddenly, she stabs him, jolting Respati awake and back into his own realm. When he comes downstairs, he sees a news report about the mysterious death of the woman he had seen in his dreams. At school, Tirta tells Respati that he discovered all the people who died came from the same village called Beijing Jiawu. He admits he's not sure if it's just a coincidence, but Respati firmly replies that he's certain it's not. Tirta asks if they should contact the person who posted the information, but Woolen suggests they contact the woman instead. They all gather in Respati's room, where she explains that it's been a while since she last practiced, but as long as she wears her necklace, no evil force can harm her. Tirta asks what they should do if that doesn't work, and Woolen responds that they may need to force her to wake up by covering her face with a cloth and then slapping or punching her. If necessary, she adds, they can even stab her with a sharp object. Tirta decides to wait outside while Respati and Woolan perform the ritual. After a while, something suddenly begins to happen to Woolan, sending Respati into a panic. And when he checks on her, she says, "I am not Woolan," intensifying his fear. As he steps back, he glimpses the old woman in the mirror instead of Woolan. Gathering his courage, he approaches her and apologizes, asking if she is the same lady he saw last night. The woman nods, and Respati asks if she is from Beijing Jiawu, to which she nods again. She then warns him that if he and Jimin want to stay safe, they must find Mustika, as she is the only one who knows how to kill Sukma. Confused, Respati asks how to find her, to which the woman replies, "West side, on the riverbank, and she smells like Malam." Suddenly, Woolen convulses again, and Respati realizes she has been possessed by a dangerous entity. Woolen then climbs up the wall, screaming at him, causing everything in the room to fly into the air before crashing down. Meanwhile, Tirta finds the door locked, and Grandpa and Abdul arrive hearing the commotion. Inside, the entity taunts Respati, saying she smells Beijing Jiawu people. But he steels himself and asks, "Who is she and where is Woolan?" The entity tells him that he is next, and that there's no need to search for her, because she will come to him soon. Just then, Woolan collapses, and Respati catches her, and at that moment, the door finally opens, and Tirta rushes in with Grandpa and Abdul. Later, Grandpa asks Woolan if she can communicate with spirits, to which she nods. He then asks Respati if he saw the victims, and he replies that he did so in the dream realm. When Grandpa looks at Tirta, he quickly adds that he was just helping them, and Respati tells Grandpa that this is the time for him to tell them about Beijing Jiawu. Grandpa shares that he lived in Beijing Jiawu for 20 years and learned the village myths. The people believe they are descendants of Nai Gadung Melati, the guardian of Mount Mirapi, and that her power is eternal, passed down through some of her bloodlines. As Respati is on his way to drop Woolan home, he asks her why she is helping him, to which she replies that she wants to learn more about the dream realm, because understanding how it works could allow someone to do anything, even live without nightmares forever. Curious, he asks her what her nightmare is, to which she responds, "A life without her mother." The next day, Tirta tells Respati that he found the riverside house, explaining that it's just as the clues indicated. It's located on the west side of the river, and the woman sells flowers, including Malam. After school, Respati and Tirta visit Mustika's house, and the moment Respati sees her, he's shocked to realize that Mustika is the same old woman from his dreams, and the revelation causes him to collapse. When Respati wakes up, he's surprised to see his parents standing before him. Overjoyed, they embrace him tightly, and his father says, "Let's go home together." Respati begins to follow them, but a sudden voice calls out, urging him to wake up. He spins around and sees Mustika standing behind him, who tells him to fight it, and as he turns back, he sees Sukma there, who chillingly tells him, "You are the one I've been looking for." Panicked, Respati asks, "Who are you?" But instead of answering, Sukma begins moving toward him, prompting Respati to stab himself, jolting himself awake from the nightmare. Grandpa gently calms Respati down and asks him to sit, and as Respati settles, He's startled to see Mustika sitting before him, but Grandpa explains that this lady helped him when he passed out. Mustika explains that Sukma was once a powerful witch from Beijing, Jawa, respected by everyone in the village. She lived with a little boy who often helped her and was like a son to her. Sukma believed herself to be the reincarnation of Nai Gadang Melati. However, in her obsessive pursuit of knowledge about the dream realm, she resorted to sacrificing her patience. But after this dark turn, the villagers shunned her. Filled with fear and distrust, they eventually beat her severely, leaving her injured, and they then tied her up and abandoned her in a rundown shack with no means of escape. Weeks later, Sukma's lifeless body was found, but no one dared to bury her, and a few days later, her body mysteriously vanished. Mustika believes Sukma's spirit drains the power of those sharing Nai Gadang Melati's bloodline, and suspects the boy Sukma once cared for plays a role. To further investigate, Mustika performs a ritual to access the dream realm. She places a blank sheet of paper in a tub of water, and as it soaks, Rispati's image appears on it. Mustika concludes that Sukma has found what she's been searching for. She explains that he is the heir of Nai Gadang Melati, born on the first day of the year, and with that comes the power to defeat Sukma. Rispati asks, how? To which Mustika responds that he must behead Sukma in the dream realm, but Grandpa interrupts, saying it's too dangerous and he don't want to lose any more of his family. The following day, Woolen shares with Rispati that, when she was younger, she used to hear voices in her head, which her mother referred to as a gift. The voices could have been devils, jinns, or spirits, but as a child, she didn't understand their meaning. However, she remembered that they warned her about a lurking danger. Not wanting to lose her sanity, she chose to ignore them until her mother was mugged on her way home, and since her mother's death, she has been unable to sleep peacefully. Rispati replies that he understands, as he is familiar with that feeling as well, and Woolen acknowledges that she doesn't know what happened to his parents, but emphasizes that he has an opportunity to help people and even save them. She advises him not to let himself regret wasting that chance. Later, the three friends visit Mustika, who informs them that defeating Sukma in the dream realm won't be easy, as he isn't strong enough despite his powers. Rispati asks if there's any other way to accomplish it, to which she replies that they need to burn Sukma's corpse. Tirta interjects, stating that no one knows where the body is, and Rispati asks if there's anything he can do. Mustika explains that there is a ritual that will unlock his full potential, but they need someone whose dream he can infiltrate, and Woolan offers to take on that role. The ritual begins, and Mustika tells Rispati that he will soon enter the dream realm, advising him to trust his instincts, no matter what happens. She then places her hand on his head and starts singing a lullaby while submerging him in a tank filled with water, and explains that by aligning his heart and mind, the dream realm will allow him to manifest whatever he desires. In the dream realm, he encounters Woolan and asks if this is what she sees every time she falls asleep. Woolan nods, and Rispati comforts her by suggesting they meet her mother. When she asks how, he replies that Mustika said to follow his instincts. He then grabs her hands, and they are transported to a different place, where Woolan tells him that this is where they found her mother. Rispati closes his eyes and manifests the scene, envisioning the moment the thieves approach Woolan's mother. Suddenly, a crowd intervenes, driving the thieves away and saving her. Overjoyed, Woolan rushes to her mother and hugs her tightly. And moments later, Rispati and Woolan emerge from the dream realm. Later that night, Abdul slits Mustika's throat, brutally killing her. And then, we see him performing a ritual with Sukma's dead body in front of him. The next day, Tirta informs Rispati about Mustika's death, stating that it wasn't Sukma, as she didn't kill her victims that way. He recalls that Mustika mentioned a boy who always assisted Sukma, and if that boy has killed her, it means he knows about them too. At that moment, Woolan becomes possessed by Sukma, causing her necklace to break, and Rispati is filled with terror as she begins to sing the lullaby. Suddenly, strange occurrences unfold around her, causing the students in the classroom to panic. Sukma then forces Woolan to bang her head against the table, and when Tirta and some other students attempt to restrain her, Sukma taunts Rispati, claiming he heard that he wants her head. Rispati demands Sukma to leave her body, to which she replies on one condition, that he must come with him. Respati challenges Sukma to come at him if she dares, prompting Sukma to push everyone away and grab Respati by the throat. Two of the students try to restrain Wulan and force her to sit in a chair, but she bites one of them on the arm, causing him to collapse in pain. Turta quickly takes his place while Respati grabs a cloth from a table and drapes it over her. In a fit of anger, Sukma throws them aside and causes Wulan to levitate into the air, still seated in the chair. Respati quickly grabs a pen and stabs Wulan in the hand, causing Sukma to scream in anger and Wulan to lose consciousness. Next, we see them in the hospital, where Respati apologizes to Wulan, but she reassures him that he did the right thing, and that the important thing is she is still here and talking to him. Respati then notices Turta listening to the lullaby and writing something. He tells Turta that he always hears that song in his dreams, to which Turta responds that there is something he should check in his room. They all arrive at Respati's house, where they encounter Abdul at the door, but they ignore him and rush to Respati's room. Turta checks under the bed and discovers something hidden there, which shocks Respati, and when Turta asks Wulan if she knows what it is, she replies that it's buhol and explains that shamans typically use this to send curses. She adds that whoever placed it there must have invited Sukma into his dream. Turta then questions how the suspect could have sneaked in and planted it there, and they suddenly realize it's Abdul. They all rush downstairs after hearing a noise and are shocked to find Grandpa lying unconscious on his bed. Respati tries to wake him, while Turta quickly checks under the bed and discovers another buhol there. He asks Respati if he still has nyawa Malam, to which he responds that Mustika had a lot of it, but they don't have time. He then touches his grandpa's face, transporting himself into the dream realm. There, he hears his grandpa's screams and rushes to his side, where he encounters Sukma and demands she let grandpa go. But she replies that if he wants him safe, he should come with her, and that there's no need to be scared. Grandpa pleads with him not to do this, but Respati begins to move toward her. As he walks, he remembers Mustika telling him to follow his instincts, no matter what happens, and he closes his eyes. He then envisions himself using his powers to restrain Sukma and pulls Grandpa toward him. However, Sukma smiles and frees herself, revealing her true demonic form. As Respati tries to take Grandpa away, Sukma chases them and lunges at them, and in a desperate attempt to save his grandfather, Respati pushes him away. Sukma strangles Respati, who urges Grandpa to stab himself, but instead he stabs Sukma, and Respati stabs himself. Returning from the dream realm, he rushes back to Grandpa, desperate to return to the dream world, but he realizes that he can't do that anymore. Next, in the hospital, Respati confesses that he was always afraid something like this might happen again. He explains that his parents died because of him. His dad's car broke down on the way home, and they were robbed and killed. He recalls that there was something wrong with the car before they left, and he had said he didn't want to go because he didn't feel like it. Now, he constantly wonders if he had gone with them. Maybe he could have prevented it. He adds that if something happens to Grandpa, it will be his fault too. Wulan, trying to comfort him, says it's not over yet. His grandpa is still with them, which means he is still fighting Sukma in the dream realm. She insists that they can't stop now, and his grandpa needs him, to which he asks, but if he can't enter Grandpa's dream, how can he help him? Turta takes the buhol out of his pocket and asks, "Can this help?" To which Respati thinks for a moment and replies if he can't enter Grandpa's dream, maybe he can pull Sukma into his. He hands Turta Abdul's address and asks him to check the place, confident that Sukma's body will be there. As Wulan gets up to go with Turta, Respati stops her, saying that if something happens to her, he won't be able to forgive himself. To which she assures him she'll be fine, reminding him that Turta will be there with her. After they leave, Respati enters the dream realm, where he sees his mom asking his dad if should they order a taxi, to which he replies, "No need." Respati approaches them and says he is coming with them, which surprises them. Meanwhile, Tirta and Wulan arrive at Abdul's house and are horrified to find Sukma's corpse in a demonic form. Tirta quickly pulls a matchbox from his pocket, saying they need to burn the body. He then rushes outside, searching for something to fuel the fire, and returns with a gallon of flammable liquid. However, he struggles to open the lid. At that moment, Abdul suddenly attacks them, but they manage to dodge just in time. Abdul, with desperation in his voice, says they need to understand that he doesn't have anything against the dead, especially Jiman. Avail of this for the woman he considers his own mother. He has been looking for a way to live with her, and soon his dream will come true. Meanwhile, in the dream realm, Rispati carefully drives the car, deliberately avoiding the road where his parents had suffered their tragic accident. His mother insists they should have turned back, and suddenly they vanish, replaced by Sukma, who lunges at him with a vicious attack. Rispati jumps out of the car and eventually reaches Sukma's lair, where he confronts her once more. Using her powers, Sukma takes control of his body and lifts him into the air. She then begins to attack him, inflicting multiple cuts on his body with her nails. But Rispati gathers his strength and manages to push her back. As he falls to the ground, a light glows behind him and a dagger comes flying into his hand. Undeterred, he gets up and rushes towards Sukma to attack her, initiating a fierce fight between them. However, Sukma easily overpowers him, and they crash into a house. Meanwhile, we see that Abdul has severely injured Tirta and Wulan, and as he approaches Tirta to kill him, Wulan seizes the opportunity to throw flammable liquid on Sukma's corpse. Abdul attempts to stop her, but Tirta grabs his leg, and when he turns to strike Tirta, Wulan attacks Abdul, knocking him down. On the other hand, Sukma is about to kill Rispati when Wulan sets Sukma's corpse on fire, causing Sukma's ghost to burn in the dream realm. Seizing the opportunity, Rispati grabs a stick and strikes her with it, blowing her head off and ultimately killing her. He then quickly rushes to his grandfather and frees him before collapsing in the hospital. After a few days, we see him and his grandfather, both fully recovered, watching the news about Abdul being caught by the police. Next, the doctor tells Rispati that his insomnia is improving and asks how he feels now that he can dream peacefully, to which Rispati replies that it's nice. He then visits his parents' grave with Tirta and Wulan, and the movie ends here. After the credits, we hear a man singing a lullaby to someone in the hospital. We then see him placing a ring on his wife's finger, promising that no matter where she goes, he will find her. He then gets up and leaves the room, and the camera pans to the bird from the dream realm,